Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 11th episode of the Cincinnati Cabinet of Curiosities presents Hometown Haunts. If you're new to the channel and to the podcast, I am Kat Klockow, the host of the Cincinnati Cabinet of Curiosities Hometown Haunts, and tonight with me I have Christina Wald and Jen Koehler. Hello, ladies.
Hello.
Hello. And if you want to follow us on social media, you can find us on Twitter at CinCabinetCurio or on Instagram, Cincy Cabinet of Curiosities. And if you have a hometown haunt or creepy creature or urban legend that you want to share, or a crybaby bridge story to help out our friend James Willis, you can email them to cincycuriosities@gmail.com. That's CINCYCURIO SITIES@gmail.com. And also, we're an official podcast now. Yay!
Woo!
We're on iTunes and SoundCloud. You can find us at Cincinnati Cabinet of Curiosities on iTunes and SoundCloud. Please rate and review us so you can share the spooky love with other people who also love the strange and unusual.
Yeah, we're very close to being able to get our special URL because
so close.
So please like and subscribe.
Yes. What can we call them? The spooky army?
Yes. The curious army, perhaps.
The curious army. Yes, curious army. Rise, my curious army. Hit that subscribe button so we can get a vanity URL to make it super easy to find us.
Yes. So, are we going to start with?
We can start with weird things we saw this week. And Christina, you want to start us off?
Yes. I love this idea of howling monster wolf robots deployed in Japan to scare away wild bears. They look pretty scary too, and it feels very Japanese. Now, you said that you've been in this place before, right, Kat?
Not to this exact town, but I have been to Hokkaido. And just about, I'm going to say a half an hour south of this particular town. So for those who are listening, I used to live in Japan, and one of the great things I got to do was sightsee, and I got to go up to Sapporo for the snow festival, to Hokkaido, where these wonderful monster wolf robots now frolic through the fields.
Well, it's interesting because they said it's to scare away wild bears. So is there some sort of conservation? Because often, like, these top tier predators don't do well when they clash with humans, and it usually is disastrous for these predators. So I like that they're doing something that's to scare them away rather than killing them. Is that part of a conservation project probably in Japan?
Well, I think they're starting to inch closer to conservation. I haven't read up extremely on this particular subject, but yeah, they're trying to keep bears just away from the population, as you said, instead of mingling inside. The article that we have, apparently wild berries and acorns didn't sprout a whole lot this year, so the bears are kind of starved, so they're rummaging through trash and just trying to find something to eat before going into hibernation. And yeah, they created these. There's two monster wolf robots. Why am I reporting on your article?
No. I you could keep going.
Okay, that were created just really to scare the bears away from the population centers. I'm sure they also work for the wild boar that are super scary to run into in Japan. And I have not I've never actually experienced a wild boar, but I do know you can eat bear meat in parts of Japan because I've done that. So there are wild bear and boar everywhere, and they're just people. It's just like in the United States when you have a bear and a person run into each other. It mutually everyone's scared. So yeah.
Well, I love the design of them. They're if you click on the link to the article in our show notes, it's just how you'd imagine it would look like, and it's animatronic. It has, when motion detectors are activated, it moves its head, flashes lights, and emits 60 different sounds ranging from wolfish howling to machinery noises.
I'm watching it right now.
And the machinery maker, how do you pronounce his name?
Let me
It's OHTASEIKI.
I have floated away from that.
It says that
It's, where did it go? Ota Seki.
Otaseki has sold about 70 units of the robot since 2018. So
I
that
can
seems
see
like
that.
quite a lot for a little town.
I don't think it's all to this town. Like I said, a lot of the northern towns, Japan has an Alps, much like you would think of in Europe. And I'm trying to find our windows. I'm sorry. So one of the host families, actually our sister city to Mishawaka, is Shiojiri, which is up in the Alps, and their big product is growing grapes. And they're known for Matsumoto Castle, which is one of the few full wooden castles still standing in Japan. So one of the great things, and this is why I've experienced being in an area with wild boars, the boars are huge, they have tusks, and they are not shy to attack people. So I remember being outside just doing hand fireworks like sparklers during I think it was Obon, so it was August. And I remember my host dad coming in and going, yeah, you want to not be too far away from the house just in case there's boars, because they will come charging at you and take you out. And boars can eat people just like large pigs can. Oh, Jen. Oh.
I mean, I knew they were jerks, but I didn't think they would eat you, but all right.
Oh, you didn't know that was a good way to dispose of a body?
Well, yes,
to feed it to a pig?
I was going to say, isn't that
do they eat people for food?
What was
they
what
can?
Was what was that movie with the guy? What was that? Sexy Beast? Is that what the name of that movie was? With the guy that played, that played Gandhi. What's that actor's name?
Ben Kingsley.
Yeah,
Sir
Ben Kingsley. Because my brother used to always say you should watch Gandhi and then watch Sexy Beast because of the difference of the characters. But remember, that's how he dispatched of his enemies, was he fed them to boars.
Well, yeah, in the Hannibal series, there's a whole murder pig thing, and
there's some actual serial killers, both American and Canadian, that have the people.
Yes, and it's terrifying to think that a wild boar can knock you down and eat you because it's hungry and it's pissed off.
Yeah, more it will knock you down and kill you because it will be pissed, and then later it'll be hungry and be like, oh look, a snack,
fresh meat.
All right, well,
tasty. So now you see why these foxes, and it should be to note with the conservation thing, I think you were just about to get this to Christina, is the wild wolves are extinct in Hokkaido. And that's why they had to make robots of them, because the actual predators are gone now. So
that's happened in a lot of areas, like Yellowstone, for example, where they brought the wolves back because, when you start messing with the ecosystem there, things go awry. But from Japan to Cincinnati and Pringles.
Oh yes,
this
was a wonderful. Oh my goodness, what a great! If you're hungry, pick up some original Pringles. If you're a wild boar, pick up 100. So this was a great one. That it's not. It falls into our weird things we ran into. It's not necessarily a news item. So, I found this thankfully through the r/Cincinnati subreddit. So thank you, Reddit. You helped me with tonight's episode. I did not know that the inventor of the iconic Pringles can died here in Cincinnati and was buried in an original flavor Pringles can somewhere in Springfield Township, Ohio. So his name was Frederick J. Barr, or just Fred Barr. And he used to work for Procter & Gamble, which is a large company here in Cincinnati. They are one of the backbones of the city. And he invented the Pringles can. Well, when he passed away in 2008, he had requested that a portion of his body, I guess whatever could fit in there. I did not read
ashes.
There's not a lot of ashes.
This is going to be his ashes here. Thank you. I kind of jumped over the cremation bit, but a portion of his ashes would be put into a Pringles can and buried with his wife, Eileen. So, according to a 2008 interview with Time, his eldest son, Larry, described how they stopped at a Walgreens on their way to the funeral home to buy a can of Pringles. They decided on the classic original flavor to send their father off in style.
Seems
And I
sensible.
have to say, family, that was wonderful.
Yeah.
I love that. He now is in a Cincinnati Springfield Township cemetery. If you want to look for it, you can. Be respectful if you choose to visit.
Hmm.
Yes.
So do they put Pringles on his grave instead of flowers? I picture like a little
I
stack.
am sure at the anniversary of his birthday every year, somebody
A
comes
little
by
a
and
little
does it.
stack.
Yeah.
He seems like he would have been a purist though. He probably didn't go for those strange flavors of Pringles that they.
I don't know. He could have been a fun gentleman. He was a food chemist, I believe, and yeah, he was a chemist who specialized in food storage research and development for Procter and Gamble. So, my cousin's wife is also a food chemist, so I can really appreciate this.
Oh,
So,
cool.
Mhm.
yeah.
All right, and I guess now we segue to Jen's
Jen.
story. And how do you pronounce it again? It's
Krampus.
Krampus,
Krampus.
Rumpus.
not
He's not
Krampus.
a crumpet.
Krampus.
Krampus. I can't say it.
I wish I
I'm
had some heavy
sorry.
metal music to play behind this. That we'd be
So,
allowed to listen
heavy metal music would be perfect for this segment because our segment tonight is all about Krampus, or Krampus, as he's known about in the United States. So, for those of you who are German, Austrian, speak German or Austrian, we are aware that we are butchering this terribly. But also keep in mind that we are three women who grew up in the Midwest of America, and there is a town outside of Cincinnati that is clearly Chavoy, but is pronounced Cheviot. So I apologize in advance. The proper pronunciation, as I have been taught today, is Krampus. But here in the United States, we know it as Krampus. And from there, Jen, share your news story.
Yes, and I apologize for letting my German ancestors down, but we immigrated a long time ago. So I don't remember where I originally found this this event, but every year on December 5th, they celebrate over in Germany, in Austria, and that whole area, Krampus. So what they do is they dress up in these terrifying Krampus costumes with just evil looking faces and horns, and they're crazy expensive. And then I think some of them, they do like a Krampus run, and they chase drunken people down the street. And it's all in celebration of the half man, half goat demon, whose legend has been around since pagan times, and whose Krampus parade is one of Europe's most popular festivals. So, yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it. Just an excuse to drink and dress up and have fun. And, don't be a naughty child, and they won't come after you.
So it's kind of like St. Patrick's Day with goats.
Yeah, evil goat men. Mm-hmm. 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 Well, I don't know. Is Krampus evil?
No.
No.
Well, meh.
He's just there to scare bad children to be good.
He's a boogeyman.
Mhm.
He's a
So, I forgot to bring. I have a wonderful Krampus ornament that I need to unearth that I have.
Actually,
I have to hide him when family visits because it makes me look like a very satanic cult member. The only people that appreciate that are my sister-in-law and her husband because they're deep metal fans, like metal
Nice.
music, and they're just like, "That's awesome," and I'm like, "Yeah, isn't it?"
Yeah.
So yeah, that's why I'm looking at my phone. I'm being highly unprofessional right now, but
Oh, that's okay. I'm looking at mine too.
yeah,
But
so-
yeah, he's more or less, this article says on TripAdvisor that he's Santa's evil twin.
yeah, I don't know if twin's quite the right word. So, yeah, I ran into Krampus, oh goodness, over a decade ago. And So December 5th is Krampusnacht. So that's Krampus night. And that is, I guess, December 6th is the big festival for St. Nicholas. And so basically kind of like Bigfoot, or even now contemporarily it would be Slender Man. Krampus would go around at night on December 5th and collect naughty children. So we've kind of evolved from this story that is very regional to southern Germany in the Alps area of Austria to a story where kids who are bad get coal from Santa or no toys. So I love seeing how all these Christmas traditions have morphed. Now, I learned about him because of my friend Jeff Belanger, who was really one of the first people that talked about this Krampus run in the United States over a decade ago. Just talking about, hey guys, there's this really fun, different holiday character that's different than the Yule Cat or the Yule Log, and he's known as Krampus, and he kidnaps children and thwacks them with sticks. Isn't he fun? So that's my interpretation of Jeff. I'm sorry, Jeff, but he's very bubbly. I love it. Yes, thank you. It's my Krampus ornament.
Oh, he's
Oh,
neat.
let me hold it up again. Hold it up.
I'm going to get him out of the box so you're not seeing the reflective bits. He's a glass ornament who has collected a little bit of dust over the year. But while I do this, Jen, do you have any more of the article to share?
Well, I did watch a video, and these are grown men, so they're already big, and then you add in this big furry devil-looking costume with huge bells on it, and then they walk through the street, kind of whipping people with kind of the fringe of their costume. And it just looks like a lot of fun.
There's a lot of interesting lore in Europe, especially like Northern Europe, but really all of Europe, about, different types of beings, kind of the whole world of fairy. There's a lot of, the thing that's really interesting about a lot of these stories, and we could probably do an episode of legends of fairy and stuff like that, people being spirited away, taken away by spirits. And actually a lot of encounters are not that unlike alien encounters now. So there's been a lot of talk about, oh, look at that.
I can't see him.
Yes, so for our viewers on YouTube, I have unearthed my Krampus. And here is his lovely tongue.
Oh, he's awesome.
Cool. He is awesome.
I'm doing my little makeup version.
Oh, there you go.
I am so YouTube makeup personing this. Okay. So he has he's holding all of his rushes that he thwacks naughty people with. Mm-hmm. What I really love is a terrified child that is hiding in the bag. And there is the bag. He actually has two children that he's sitting on with his little tail and his hoofed feet. So this I got a few years ago. Archie McPhee makes this particular ornament, and man, they package him hardcore because he took a while to get out of there. But yeah, I keep him at Christmas. Throughout December, he sits on the shelf, and like I said, usually I have to I usually have to hide him when we have guests that don't quite get him because he looks a little demonic, but I love him.
That's the one thing about quarantine this year. You can go full Krampus.
Yes, I even have a t-shirt that I unfortunately couldn't find before the show.
Oh, well, I have a friend that did a really wonderful Kickstarter last year or the year before? She did a Krampus wrapping paper and gift cards, and they were wonderful.
Yes, and one of the things I discovered was I ran into them 2 years ago, was the Krampuslauf Zinzinnati. So Cincinnati has a very heavy German immigrant culture here. And a good half of our city was German immigrants at one point. So we have a Bachfest, we have a huge Oktoberfest, but we also have a Krampuslauf Zinzinnati, and Cincinnati being the German way to pronounce Cincinnati. So Zinnati. And we have this wonderful group of not only gentlemen, but women as well, who will dress up as Krampus, and they do appearances at all sorts of different parades and events throughout the year. I ran into them at Bachfest in 2018, and they're the ones that taught us how to pronounce this correctly. And I love how on their website they say, "We are not here to scare children. In fact, children really love us."
Aw.
Yeah. So we have a strong Krampus here in Cincinnati, and we've contacted them, and hopefully sometime this month they'll be able to chat with us about their stuff. I forgot what you were talking about earlier, Christina.
Oh no, I was curious about. I mean, this is a good segue because I'm curious about where the origins of these, like there's a lot of pagan symbolism involving goats and fawns and that sort of thing, and I was wondering if they know exactly what this came from. I mean, there's actually some suggestions that Santa and reindeer are related to hallucinogenic plants and stuff like that. They think a lot of these northern traditions had a lot to do with like psychedelic mushrooms and stuff like that. Um, you know, like some of the berries that the reindeer eat and some of the mythology and stuff. You know, a lot of this is oral tradition. And so I was curious if they know a lot about the origins of Krampus, or if it's
So looking at it is kind of a lot like the origins of the Christmas tree, where it was a Yuletide attempt to keep greenery going throughout the dark months of the winter time. So we have Christmas trees as a pagan attempt to keep the green men alive through winter, which is the harshest months. Um, so this is really, Krampus is very much a Bavarian Austrian thing. So something I discovered was the Klockows. If you notice, I have a very German Polish last name. That's my husband's last name. They're from northern Germany. And when I asked my father-in-law about this, they're just like, I don't know. That's a southern German thing. So even within just what we would consider in America confined area, you have they don't do Krampus. That they're just like, they do that down south. So I'm looking at one of the websites, and it says that legend states that Krampus punishes bad children during the Yule season and even captures particularly naughty children and takes them away into the woods. It's from Germanic folklore, and the influence is long, 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 to the point where they really don't know when it started, but it started before St. Nicholas or Santa Claus came around by several centuries. So because we don't have it written down particularly, we don't know when he originated. Though they do have writings and illustrations of him from the 17th century, and by then he was well incorporated into the Christian Christmas folklore of the time and of the area. So that's, I think, the best way we can start this particular timeline of history is from the 17th century.
Well, I wonder if it was something similar to sort of the Santa Claus Americanized theme had to do with illustrations done in the 1800s. And that's where a lot of the Santa lore came from. Like if somebody at some point illustrated it, or, you know, gave it more definition, and that's where a lot of the modern stuff comes from. I'm curious. I had an article here, and I'm just where it talks about the truth about Krampus, and it talks about who made it popular in the US.
I'm going to say people who love metal music and beer. That's
Well, it
my
says
guess.
in 2004, the collector Monty Beauchamp, I don't know how I don't know how you pronounce his name, launched a series of books that did much to familiarize Americans with Krampus via a reprinted collection of turn of the century Krampus postcards. Thanks to
Yeah.
those images, most Atlas Obscura readers will probably be able to describe Krampus, a distinctly satyr like devil with dark fur and an incessantly slithering tongue.
Yes. So yeah, it was something that did not get brought over to the United States too much. And that's because, like with a lot of immigrants that moved to the United States, they felt they needed to suppress their old world stuff to fit in and assimilate better. And so, but postcards were definitely something like the postcards that you just mentioned. If you look up Krampus, you're going to find hundreds of them, and they circulated around Germany, the Bavarian and Austrian areas. So, yeah, it's that this was very, until really this guy posted this, it was very a unique thing that happened only in this area, and tourists could probably visit to go watch and get chased by Krampus. That I know of, the way that he's illustrated with the goat head and the goat horns and the shaggy Chewbacca-like fursuit, that's kind of how he's looked for a while. It's kind of like, oh, I cannot remember the name because it's a difficult Gaelic name. It's the horse head that is, I think, in Wales, that they dress up with a white sheet and ornaments, and
Yeah,
they
I
go
know what
to
you're talking about, and I
Paris
can't remember what
carols.
it's called.
Wow, if I thought German was hard, Welsh and Gaelic is super difficult. Um, and that's another one where it hasn't changed a whole lot. And I love how these really old characters are very skeletal and very, uh, well, what we by modern interpretations would be scary. And, but they're really natural, actually, organic almost.
Well, I
Yeah.
mean, so much is lost, from the history of these old cultures. And so you just really have like bits and pieces that people kind of add to, and then you lose old parts. And so, it seems like there's a lot of our history that's really interesting that's lost.
Yeah.
And then one thing, since Krampus has become popular, there was a movie that starred Tony Collette that came out 2015. Did you see it? Is it terrible?
Oh, of course it's terrible.
Oh, okay. I didn't watch it. I didn't watch
I
it.
haven't seen it.
And also I noticed Image Comics, since the springs out of Compass, did a Krampus comic in 2014. So 2014, 2015 was a big, although I'd like to see more Brahm. I don't know if you're familiar with that fantasy artist, very famous for doing Dungeons and Dragons in the 90s. And now he does his own books. He did a Krampus book a couple of years ago that's really lovely. I'll put links to these in the show notes.
Yes, please.
And I was an art show. I was telling you guys I was in an art show for the Krampus Festival here, and it looked like 2013 because that's when the art was dated.
Oh, okay. I should say, with my hot take with the movie, it's a lot of folklore characters. When I see them put onto film, it's just kind of irks me as a folklorist going, wow, that's a sensational way of interpreting that particular story. So please go watch it, make your own judgments here.
I
Don't
love
listen
Toni
to my
Collette,
hot take.
but
So
I,
yeah.
I think it's difficult to depict the feeling of fairy and folklore and stuff like that. I mean,
Yeah.
looking at movies like Midsommar and Wicker Man, like those are all sort of in the same vein of like these tiny villages that have
It's
legends that harken
making
back.
the exotic scary in a way and making it
Mhm.
feel much other. And it's an interesting take. I actually haven't seen Midsummer Summer. That was just
Midsommar is how it's pronounced.
Samar.
Jen
Midsommar.
and I saw it together. I thought it was good.
Yeah. It was
I've
good.
read a lot of folklore's take on it, and the iconography and how it was filmed, and it was interesting. It was like, huh, okay. But I do want to get back to Krampus with there is a toned down version of what Jen was describing with the parade that happens, and it's Chris Krindelmartin is an urban centers in Munich and Salzburg, and these are tourist friendly, kid friendly, Krampus parades where kids can still see Krampus, but they see him in the daylight, and you don't have torches, and he's quite popular with the kids and photographers.
I wonder if is there a and we can talk about this in the next because we've got a minute left. I was wondering if like Oktoberfest has a similar sort of pagan aspect to it that we don't see as much. I mean, Bachfest has the goat. I mean, it seems like there's a lot of this kind of stuff. But
that's something I can quickly look up. All right, so you asked before our break about Oktoberfest and if there was any actual folklore that had to do with it. And the fun thing is Oktoberfest is a wholly modern festival, which I didn't know. And I'm going to say probably most Americans don't know, because we're just like, yeah, this is a time to drink, especially here in Cincinnati, because we have, what is it, the second largest Oktoberfest?
As if we ever need an excuse to drink.
Yeah.
Yeah.
True. So, basically, Oktoberfest is the world's largest folk festival, and it started back in 1810. Did you know that?
Nope.
So, I'm looking for my original. Oh, where did it go? Sorry, things just wander away all the time. So the first Oktoberfest took place in Munich on October 12th, 1810, in correspondence with the honoring of the marriage between Prince Ludwig of Bavaria and Princess Therese von Sachsen-Hindenburghausen. I'm sorry, our German listeners. Princess Therese von Sachsen-Hindenburghausen. There we go. The wedding celebrations lasted for almost a week and concluded with a horse race held in an open area that later was named after the bride's name. So it was Theresienwiese, or Therese's Green. And the next year, the celebrations repeated in combination with the state agricultural fair, and in 1818, food and drink serving booths were introduced to the fest. And then it just evolved into the wonderful Oktoberfest that we know of today, another fantastic Bavarian invention.
Oh, interesting.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So was this the Mad King Ludwig who did Neuschwanstein, or is this another Ludwig?
I don't know that one.
We'll
I'm sure our listeners will correct us.
I wasn't sure. I was curious. I mean, because a lot of times those royal families have a lot of repeats of names.
Yeah. So unfortunately, German history is not my strong point. Mm-hmm. So if one of our wonderful listeners or viewers know, you feel free to chime in.
And you said, going back to Krampus, what was the thing you found?
So a few weeks ago, you had a news article that had to do with basically the Japanese version of Krampus, which is the Namahage. So Namahage, we read a news article about how the prefecture of Akita had said that the Namahage wasn't having to go around and punish children this year because of the virus, because of COVID-19. So I thought I would share a small little cultural tip about Namahage, because it is very similar to Krampus. So Namahage is off of the Oga Peninsula and Akita Prefecture on the main island of Honshu. And so you're going to look at Japan, Tokyo's at the bottom. This place is near the top, near Hokkaido, just literally across the straight from that. And this Namahage are frightfully dressed men armed with deba knives or wood fakes or paper mache. And they're wearing basically these reed coats that make them look super shaggy. So instead of fur, they're these wood pellet coats. And they march in pairs and go door to door to people's homes, much like how in a Krampus parade they would, and admonishing children who may be guilty of laziness or bad behavior, which is the exact same thing that Krampus does. And they, in Japan, they're yelling phrases like, "Are there any crybabies around?" or "Nakoko wa inaga?" or "Are there any naughty children around?" So "Waruko wa ineka," which ineka is just the verb that they use up north. So it's exactly like Krampus, except for instead of happening on the night of December 5th, this is a New Year's tradition. but it's still a fall winter tradition of scaring children by screaming at them.
Well, maybe it just means kids are very naughty and always have been.
Yeah.
That may be it.
I would
There's
be
like a common thread here.
Yes.
Oh yeah. I
So
would be interested in hearing stories of children that grew up with that.
I would love to hear that.
Yeah.
So yet again, I'm appealing to our viewers. If you are from Bavaria, Germany, or Austria, or part of northern Honshu, where you would have encountered the Namahige, Hage, please write into us. And Nihongo de oke yo. You can write in Japanese to us. So in German, I have friends that speak German. So
Well, it's interesting because we were talking about how, and segueing to some other Yule type traditions like the Icelandic Yule Cat and the Yule lads and these tales, which I love the Yule Cat, where he's a huge and vicious cat who lurks around the snowy countryside during Christmas Yule and eats people who have not received any new clothes to wear before Christmas Eve. Which
Yeah.
seems like he's kind of a capitalist, which doesn't surprise me with a cat. But a giantess, which there's a lot of folklore about giants, and so this is about a giantess with an appetite for the flesh of mischievous children. So there's a lot of overlap with fairy tales. It seems like there's a lot of like crones, old women. This is a giantess that want to eat children. And then, of course, she has her sons, which are the Yule lads, and they're 13 mischievous pranksters who steal from or harass the population and all have descriptive names that convey their favorite way of harassing, which is hilarious. But it seems like a lot of these myths were written down in the 1700s. And you were saying, which is also kind of similar to when the fairy tales, like the Grimm's fairy tales and stuff, were collected. And they've recently found that a lot of the fairy tales are way older than they ever imagined, like not hundreds of years old, but thousands.
Yeah, like Cinderella has various versions throughout the world that are like, I think the Chinese version is a few thousand years old.
Or
So
longer, they don't know. I mean,
yeah, yeah,
war and fall and rise of civilizations with these oral traditions, people don't know where they came from. I mean, they're the
yeah.
first urban legends, if you will.
Yeah. So you had asked about that, and I remember from one of my very early anthropology classes, we talked about the origins of where all these legends came from, because a lot of them tend to just stop in the 17th century if you're Western. And the reason being is the nobility of the time, or the upper classes, were actually able to get enough rest time to go out and talk to people. That's basically what it is. So a lot of our social studies that we know in the classic modern sense, not social studies, but social sciences, social studies is part of that, got their start around this time. And with anthropology, that's just writing down culture that we see happening, and it's a constantly evolving science. And that's why I love seeing all these different Krampus, because we're taking information that we knew of from the 17th century and we're still able to layer it onto modern interpretations. And yes, that horror movie does get cataloged with all the rest of it because it's a modern interpretation of Krampus. Deserving of the American pronunciation of Krampus.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. These stories are continuously reimagined and altered and that sort of thing. So it's very interesting to follow the thread. I got that book a couple years ago where somebody retranslated the original Grimm's fairy tales, and they were much more grim. And they said
they
actually
dark.
they were less dark in the second translation because they kind of had self-edited and made them a little bit, I don't want to say family friendly, but they like they were a little less raw. But I mean, the tales were very violent and but people, I mean, imagine you couldn't see movies. This was your blockbuster movie, so of course, the idea of people, I mean, they were like what you'd watch now. I mean, you like the horror and violence. It's kind of a lot like kind of like when you look at religious imagery, like in Catholic churches where and actually more notably when I went to Romania, they have the famous painted churches, and they're like comic books. I mean, and they don't show happy scenes. They show like violent killing of saints, and they almost are like comic panels. Like, this is a guy getting his head chopped off. This is a guy being flayed. And people probably ate that up the way people love, murder stories today. Like we're going to be doing a show next week about, and people
Murder.
yeah, people love that kind of stuff. And so, the fairy tales that were gruesome and violent were probably people's favorites. That was like seeing a action movie.
Yeah, life has always been really tough, and very, very bloody for most of humanity. If
Well,
you're
it keeps you in line too.
It does.
Yeah.
And it also kind of reminds you that everyone is mortal and we're only around for so long. And so, back to Yule Cat, which sounds like a boar that will eat somebody.
Just get a new coat. You'll be fine.
Yeah, it's after learning that particular story, I was like, I'm never going to be upset with receiving a new pair of socks.
No.
Though there was a
saves your
Christmas, yeah, it would save your life. Though there was a Christmas 2 years ago where no one in my family knew what to get me. Everyone got me socks.
Wow.
I got 52 pairs of new socks.
And you were like, no graphic novels? What's wrong with you guys?
Yeah, it was nothing. Yeah, it was just all socks. And I'm like, my feet, I like funky socks. They're fun. But I don't need 52 pairs of them. I'm still opening new socks.
Oh,
like I didn't open them all up at one time. I saved it, but going back to the press release about the Namahage that we learned about a few weeks ago, the Krampuslauf Zinzinnati also put out a press release yesterday. And this is reading from their Facebook page. Breaking release. Krampus will not be leaving the safe confine of the Austrian Alps this year due to the masses not being able to control themselves and social distance. Even the Christmas demon has had enough. So Krampuslauf Zinzinnati is not going to be doing any events this year, and apparently neither is Krampus, which I think is the smart thing to do. Though if you are super, super naughty, expect Krampus to kidnap you, throw you in a sack, and beat you with reeds.
One thing that's interesting, I have a link to too, because we talked a little bit about the Icelandic myth, is Saturnalia, which a lot of people talk about that too. And it was a public holiday celebrated around December 25th in Rome. And it also has a lot of similar things we see today: a time of feasting, goodwill, generosity to the poor, the exchange of gifts, and the decoration of trees. They say, but this wasn't Christmas, this was Saturnalia, the pagan Roman winter solstice festival. And so this article was saying, was this what Christianity adopted for and of course their conclusion is they don't think that it was, but it does sound really close.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, go on.
Oh, I was going to say, chances are it didn't even start with Rome. I mean, I'm sure there was a lot of appropriation in Rome of different cultures. Again, talking about writing down these myths and stuff, when a culture didn't survive, and there was, and even recently, I mean, you think that, oh, well, Rome obliterated a lot of these cultures when they would invade. They thought that the culture, because it wasn't Roman, and it's not just the Romans that were complicit in this. Our own history tends to be very Roman and Greek centric. So we tend to look at, not we, but the people that archived history tended not to look at other historical things, like talking about Celtic myth and that sort of thing. I mean, just as in the 1900s, they almost got rid of some, was it the Irish, it's Gaelic, the Irish language, I can't remember which it is,
yes,
almost went dead because they forced children not to learn it. And that was true of some of the other, like Scotland, England, Wales. They all have their own languages, and a lot of these languages are dangerously close to being lost forever. And that
just off of that, there's a lot of First Nation languages and
Native
American languages
that as well. Yes,
that are also going extinct. I know when I was taking Japanese at Indiana University, we had a few First Nation professors who were trying very hard to keep records of all these, and then also not just linguistics, but also traditions, folk traditions that were being lost, because you do have Native American populations where particular tribes are dwindling only in the tens of people, and their cultures need to be saved. They're being absorbed into other local tribes that are close and similar, but it's not the same. So yeah, that happens all over. The history is written by the winners, and only
Yes.
recently are we actually looking at everyone who got marginalized and left behind and saying
Mhm.
your history is valid.
Yeah, we've lost so much, and just think how much we could learn about how these tales traveled if we hadn't gotten rid of, because you might be able to source kind of like the travel of myths, because like as you mentioned, the Cinderella story is in many cultures. And actually there's a lot of indigenous American cultures that have similar stories to cultures in, Europe and stuff, very ancient history. But when you destroy that, you lose all of that history. And
Yeah.
it's very sad.
Yeah, like trying to untangle the Hopewell culture, which was
Exactly.
a huge culture here in especially Eastern North America, had trading routes all the way down to the Olmec in Guatemala, but we don't know a whole lot about them. But they were integral to the establishment of a lot of other contemporary native tribes. So
Yeah.
big discussion.
Yeah.
As
Well,
James would say, that's a two-bottle discussion going on.
well, I just find a lot of that stuff really interesting, and
Yeah.
thinking about, say, the Krampus, and thinking about Christmas and the things that we do at Christmas and some of the symbols that kind of like travel through these holidays without context. So why do we have wreaths? Why do we have,
Christmas trees, lights
yeah.
in Christmas trees, the pickle hidden in the Christmas tree.
Yes. What is the story behind the pickle in the tree?
I
I've
don't
heard it,
know.
but I don't remember what it is. We'll have it next week.
It's a tradition that's been in my family for at least 3 generations, and
Wow.
or at least my father's side of the family. And yeah, and there's a small gift to whomever finds it first. So
Wow. Uh-huh.
yeah.
Oh.
See, I had never heard of it until like a few years ago
Oh really?
because we never did it. So I
Yeah.
don't. Yeah.
Yeah, that it's fun. So I'm gonna say to our viewers and listeners, if you have family traditions that you do and would like to share them with us, you can email them to cincycuriosities@gmail.com. We will share them. They can be any type of family tradition doing during New Year's, Hanukkah, and Christmas, and all the other wonderful celebrations in between. And also, I'm going to put up a Krampus challenge to everyone. If you would like, draw Krampus for us and tag us on Instagram and Twitter, and that'd be great. And if you send it to us, we can also feature it.
In
If you
the
give us your
episode.
social media, yeah, in the episode, and also we'll give you your social media handle because we believe in compensating artists the best we can. Though if it's a free submission, all we can do is go, "Hey, look at that." We can't
But,
really pay you. I'm sorry.
well, I mean, if you, this is a great time to sketch Krampus, since
It
it's
is.
it's the fifth, so
It's the 5th. That's when
which is our episode drops Wednesday at midnight. Is the fifth? What day is the fifth?
it's
It's
Saturday.
Saturday.
Yeah.
Yeah, so send us your pictures if you do anything Krampus oriented.
Or at least tag us in them.
Yes,
Yeah.
we gave our social media handles.
Mhm.
And so we can go from there. But I mean, this is an interesting discussion because I think a lot of where we talk about paranormal activity and ghosts and stuff like that, a lot of that ties into lore that's been happening for as long as there's been humans.
Yeah, that it's a subject of a future episode is ghost stories told at Christmas. Because it's a old English custom because really this is the time of the dead, as we've talked about when a few episodes back about just Halloween. And that stretches into Christmas. And I mean, you have the Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens, probably the most well-known ghost story told, but there's also ghosts referenced a lot in other pulp culture and like Christmas songs and stuff. So
Which segues nicely into our hometown haunts, which I feel like I
Ooh.
need to do some sort of logo for that too, since we have a Weird Things logo.
We need Natty.
Oh yes,
We
yes.
need to make Natty our logo. Like, yeah.
Definitely. Oh, the
Agreed.
cat's here for the hometown haunts. So,
Great.
do you want to kick off the
I will
hometown
kick
haunts,
us
Kat?
off. Yes, so for all our listeners and viewers, this is our hometown haunt section. And if you have a haunt that you would like to share with us, you can either DM them via our social media or you can email them at cincycuriosities@gmail.com. Someday I will get that correct. So, our first hometown haunt this week is from Dave. And he writes, when I waited tables at Dante's years ago, and Friday nights and I always worked the late station with an older waitress. We were walking out around 2:30 in the morning together and talking, and I looked up and saw a woman in a negligee. Is that correct?
Yeah, negligee.
Yeah, I was just making sure I was reading that correctly. Walking on the second floor walkway of the hotel building where employees had to park. I said to Rita, "What is that woman doing walking around in a negligee at this time of night?" Pointing up to the area. And she was gone. I would be It would be impossible for her to have gone anywhere because that part of the second floor had no rooms, just storage area and vending machines. We actually went up and looked, freaked me out completely, but I found out later I wasn't the only one who had seen something similar over the years. Building is torn down now. Oh, that's sad. He also includes a bonus story, I think. Yes. That was back in the 80s, by the way, quite a while ago. My brother saw the ghost at the Taft, which is the Taft Theater. He took the kids there, and a woman dressed in period garb walked by and nodded at him. He mentioned to someone later, maybe at the gift shop, that it was nice to see people dressed up there, and was told they didn't do that.
That's pretty common, isn't it, in hauntings where people will see somebody in period clothes and say, "Wow, that's really cool," and it's like,
Yeah,
well,
they think they're reenactors, and this is just from this is my, I guess, hot take. Unless they blatantly state there are reenactors in the area that you're at, you are seeing a ghost. I know at Gettysburg, they post when there's reenactments happening. At Fort Mifflin, they post when there's reenactments happening. At the Taft Theater, which is our huge theater in downtown Cincinnati.
It's really cool.
It is very, very cool. They don't do reenactments there. So if you see someone in Edwardian or Victorian clothes, or even contemporary, like 1950s, if they look out of sorts at any point and they don't have feet, they're probably dead.
Yeah, if you're going to see Margaret Cho doing her act and you see someone in period clothing, know that it's not for the show.
Now, if it was like the Christmas Carol and it was the solid interpretation where everyone's in Victorian clothes, then then you have time to go, I wonder. But if it's a contemporary thing, like seeing red green, and I see somebody in like Victorian dress and a hoop skirt,
Okay, this one is from Nicole. I had a feeling of my granddad's presence one Christmas when I was very homesick and had not long been in this country. Didn't actually see, just felt him there and a touch on my shoulder that woke me. That could have just been wishful thinking. But as we've mentioned before, this is supposed to be a time when the veil is thinner.
Yes.
And so that's a pretty common occurrence.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was a sweet one.
Yeah, that is sweet. Thank you, Nicole.
That's sweet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then Linda, you want to read Linda's?
Yes. Linda says, I have one in Cincinnati when I was in college. I had just laid down to go to sleep. I opened my eyes and there was a face in front of me. I screamed because I thought it was a rapist, but it faded into the wall. I called home because I thought someone died and was visiting me. Then I talked to the apartment manager. She told me several years earlier there had been a fire in this apartment and 2 people died. I forget the name of the apartments. It was so many years ago. Maybe my old roommates remember.
That sounds really scary.
That is scary.
I'm more scared about the fact they didn't tell them that people died in their apartment.
Don't they have to disclose that now?
No.
Or they don't, only if you ask.
You can ask. Most likely your realtors will not know unless you're in California. It goes by state, I believe. So if you're here in Cincinnati and you go, hey, did anyone die in my house? Maybe, who knows? I did property search records for the people who used to own the houses, and then did obituary records. In the old house that I used to live in, we did the previous tenants had died, but not in the house. They had died in a hospital. So
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, but it's always good to check just in case you have problems.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Then again,
call the fire department too. See if there's been any fires.
Yeah.
Mine was in a fire, and I got the report from it.
Wow.
Oh.
So
That's
so next week we're going to be segueing into people dying in apartments. We're going to be doing a sort of true crime in Cincinnati episode.
Yes, we are. Just kind of for our listeners, I wrote a haunted true crime book. So true crime is something I really love. Hello to all the fellow Queen City murderinos out there. Both Jen and I are part of your army, and oh yeah, and we are sharing an interesting story that is a very well-known urban legend here in Cincinnati that is tied to a very cold case. So, kind of taking a note from the murder squad, if anybody has any stories, knows anything about the case afterwards, please let us know so we could pass it on. But don't point fingers, don't out anybody. But we'll get more into that next week. It will be an interesting episode. It's a case I'm particularly, I don't want to say fond of, because I don't want to be ever fond of murder cases, but it interests me a lot. So
it seems like talking about haunted crime, that's a kind of common segue because of the violence of the events leading to those, from those deaths and that sort of thing. Which were you interested in first, ghost hunting or true crime stories?
I was notably interested in ghost stories first. Especially true ghost stories. So urban legends, actually just being interested in the cultural importance of urban legends, came second to my love of haunted history. And ironically, a lot of haunted history, somebody has to die to produce a ghost, so they end up being true crime anyway. And it wasn't until I became a very ardent listener of My Favorite Murderer and other like True Crime Garage and shows like that, where I realized that one reason why I like haunted history is because I like the true crime aspect of it. And as an anthropologist, even though I'm a cultural anthropologist, you do still have to take some biological anthropology classes when you're a younger student. So dissection of bodies, knowing about body farms, stuff like that is stuff that you learn about as an anthropologist, especially for all the forensic anthropologists out there. And that's something that I really loved, except for I'm really bad at chemistry. So I would have been a terrible forensic anthropologist. But I ended up writing Ohio's Haunted Crimes because I just wanted to mix the two. And it hadn't been done before. And surprisingly, there's a lot of cold cases that are preserved as ghost stories.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Interesting. And what got you interested in that stuff, Jen? Because you, like, I remember at one point you were watching a lot of that stuff, and you were telling me about the serial killers.
It's an everyday, I'm watching something, listening to something every day. Although I had to take a break earlier this year because it just, right around when COVID hit and the quarantine hit, it suddenly became too much for me. So I took a break. But I'm not sure. I mean, I've always, I mentioned before I was scared of ghosts and all that stuff. And then I got interested in it. And then at some point in high school, I read Helter Skelter. And I was so angry and so disgusted by Charles Manson that I'm like, what makes someone act like that? Like, I always want to know the motive and why. And unfortunately, you never get those answers. And
Yeah.
I might be interested in a little bit of the macabre. But at the same time, like what My Favorite Murder does really well is they really honor the victims and the victim's family, and they try to be really respectful. Same thing with Murder Squad.
Yeah.
And it just, and the more deeper I delve into it, the more gut wrenching and heart wrenching it is.
Yeah.
And it just, I kind of feel like by listening, those people aren't forgotten. Their stories aren't forgotten. And we need to stop focusing so much on the
murderers,
jerks that did that to them.
Yeah. So this particular story that we're highlighting next week is one that I purposely left out of Ohio's Haunted Crimes because her family's still alive. And there is a comfort zone that living people have when dealing with ghost stories of murder crime victims. One reason why we can talk about H.H. Holmes and his murder castle in Chicago is because this happened in 1896. So we have a really long cushion or buffer zone of history in between. So we can just talk about how he would kill his victims, throw their bodies in a vat of lye, and sell their skeletons to medical schools. That's easy to talk about now for people who are into that. Not everyone can listen to those details. They get very squeamish. But I couldn't talk about this case in that way, in that light, without giving a lot of credence to her family and that weight without me actually speaking it. There's a different type of voice, written versus speech.
Well, and also with social media and the way the world is now, I mean, I've seen and read stories of families, victims just being bombarded by armchair experts and just, well, why did you do this? Why did this victim do that? You know, where were you? You know, and they get like, there's no respect for the family.
Yeah.
And like some people are really supportive and try to help out the families, but eventually that all goes away. And just because it's a public case doesn't necessarily mean you have any right to that family's private information.
Right.
And I don't know, it's a double-edged sword. Like I enjoy reading these things and finding out about these things. I guess I'm more fascinated in like human behavior.
Yeah. You make a great psychologist. But so the information that I take for this case all comes from public record. I unfortunately did not go interview her family or friends because sometimes those are very deep wounds that don't heal. So in a way, we are going to be armchair anthropologists on this particular case. So keep that in mind. We're using official records. We're not going to try to throw too much speculation in. Because we're going to try to stay on as much on record as possible. But if we can just bring some more, highlight this story, it's a cold case. So if anybody may know, they may be alive and know. So, it goes with a lot of any of these other cold cases. Sorry, Christina.
Oh no, I was like, that sounds really interesting. Yeah. And also, before we go, you're going to be on a show this week. When's that going to air?
So I'm not sure when it will air. So I'm sorry, you may have to edit this bit out. So I'll be on Ghostly Talk with them tomorrow night, which will be December 1st. I am very excited because Ghostly Talk is a show that I've listened to for nearly its entire existence since 2002. So it's one of those old school paranormal shows. Going to be on with Scott and in the Haunted Winery and everything. So I'm excited. I'll have more information for you in a little bit, but shall I get back to our social media, where to follow us and all that stuff? Okay, navigating back up to that. So everyone, thank you for joining us on another wonderful episode of the Cincinnati Cabinet of Curiosities Hometown Haunts. I'm Kat Klockow. We have Christina Wald and Jen Koehler. And if you want to follow us, you can find us on Twitter at CinCabinetCurio and on Instagram at Cincy Cabinet of Curiosities or cincycuriosities@gmail.com. You can email us tag us if you make a Krampus illustration. Please tag us. We love to see it. If you'd like to share it with us so we can have it on the show, then just send it to us and say you have permission to air this on YouTube. And yeah, and you just have our thanks and enthusiasm for drawing Krampus.
Yeah, Kat and I will show some of our Krampus drawings.
Krampus drawings.
Yes. And Jen, you should make something out of glass. Make a glass.
Oh gosh. Okay.
Maybe not for this episode, but maybe for a later one before Christmas.
It might take a little bit longer. And that's blown. So I can't do blown glass, but I can do fused glass.
Well, great. Well, we'll see you guys next week.
Yes. Please like, subscribe.
You like, subscribe. Let us get to that first milestone so we can have our special URL.
Yeah. So we can have our curious army.
And everybody enjoy what is it? Krampusnacht.
Yeah. Krampus.
Behave.
Krampusnacht.
Yes, behave. Krampus.
And get all your family members socks before it's too late.
Yes. Save them from that Yule Cat.
Exactly.
I almost called it the Wampus Cat, but that's a different folk cat.
New one. Make it up.
Yes. All right. Well, great. We'll see you guys next week. Bye.
Bye-bye.